So we start off talking about government as a platform. And here, let me just see. All right, so big picture. So what if our government services were so well integrated into our lives that they really faded into the background? That idea of invisible bureaucracy, if you will. Or if citizens had access to see who's seen their data, what it's been processed for, why and when. Or as a business, if I could integrate my processes in with the federal government. So as part of my workflow, at some point, data is automatically sent to the government, let's say regulatory data or licensing or whatever, could be automatically sent to the government. So it just speeds my time to market. So not just a dream, Estonia is one of the top digital nations in the world. And they have 99% of their public services are already online. So as they say, only marriage, divorce, and selling your house requires you to actually go in person. Everything else from voting to prescriptions, everything else can be done online. And when COVID did hit a year ago, they were actually one of the first ones to be able to just quickly pivot. It was almost seamless for them. For new services that they were pushing out to their constituents, it was almost seamless because everyone was already online, and so these were just new services that they were able to stand up. So how did they do it? So they started, a good 20 years ago, and they had three pillars that they focused on. One was identity, which is what Poe was talking to you about. So they have a digital identity card so that everyone can prove that they are who they say they are, and that they have access to the services that they should have access to. The second piece, which is what I'm going to be talking a little bit more about today, they put something together called X-Road, and it just essentially allows their systems to talk to each other. So that's what we're looking at when we talk about the Canadian Digital Exchange platform. It's that way, that interoperability play, right? It's the way that our systems can talk to each other to make sure that you get the services that you deserve. And the third pillar, which we're not going to really touch on today, but it is important, it's that whole legislative and policy underpinning that allows certain systems to talk to each other, right? So it's one thing to say the technology can do it. It's quite another to say, are we actually allowed to share this information between these different departments? So Sign in Canada, Poe already covered that. It's really how people identify themselves. The CDXP, it's really about how do we share data, and currently in the government of Canada, it's just a myriad of point-to-point connections. So what we really want to do is get away from that and look at data and reuse on being able to reuse it many times over. And then of course, the updated legislation and policy is really all around enabling those rules. So let's talk a little bit about government as a platform. So the way we look at it, it's really every government function that exists really should be made available as a service. So things like identity verification, it's a service, right? And then anyone who needs to pull from that service can. Employment verification, business registration, even just something simple like looking up a business number, right? It's something that our ISED, or our innovation, it used to be Industry Canada, but our innovation and science department can look up. Someone else can look it up from a different department just to make sure that, yes, this business number is valid. And what it doesn't return all of the information necessarily, but it can give you a thumbs up or thumbs down. Is this business number valid? Absolutely it is, right? So when we look at licensing and permits, same sort of thing. So when we talk about data exchange, what we have put in place is the Canadian Digital Exchange platform. And it really allows that, it's that underpinning, it's the plumbing that sits underneath, right? Or your infrastructure that allows that data sharing to happen. So whether it's federal to federal, or it's federal to, international organizations, like, for example, the World Health Organizations, or even interacting with the municipalities and provinces that we have within Canada. Some of the data exchange models that we've put in place are sort of threefold. There are three types that we're really focusing on. One are APIs, and that's a real-time transaction. So if you're thinking about something like Netflix, for those of you who've been binge watching for the past year, Netflix uses an API model. Same with Amazon, right? It's a call and a response, right? So I can push data to Amazon, or I can request data and have it sent back to me, right? The second type of data exchange is messaging, which is asynchronous. It's a one-way conversation. So think of it more like a text message. I can send you a text message. It doesn't mean that I necessarily get something back. So something that would be really, would model the messaging like a broadcast would, let's say, life events. So in Canada, our provinces manage, let's say, birth certificates. So someone is born, they get registered, and that information then can be sent to our federal counterparts, whichever departments require it, right? They do then whatever they need to do with that. And again, there has to be a data sharing, agreement. It's not just widely broadcast, but it allows for that one way. And then you have bulk data, which is really around, terabytes or petabytes of data. We see that a lot with our Environment Canada or our natural resources, where they just have tons and tons of data from IoT, for example, that needs to be sent, once a day or twice a day over to a data lake, for example. So those are really the three that we focus on. And so either you're a provider of data, so you create the data. So for example, a province would be creating that data around birth registration, or you're a consumer of data, right? So you're pulling that data in, or you're pinging the service to see, is that business number valid? Yes, it is. Excellent, right? Or you can sit somewhere in between. And I think hospitals are a good example where they consume data that they might bring from your GP, right? Previous tests, results, whatnot. And they themselves may run a CAT scan or an MRI. And so they provide data, and then they'll send that back to the next, or back to your GP or to the next person in line. So some examples that we have are passports. We're looking at travel advisories, and being able to register, travel advisories in with companies like Expedia or Air Canada, and being able to, again, share that data based on, where you choose to go. Let's say in Expedia, imagine one day when we can travel again, you can, put into Expedia that you want to go to such and such location, and it'll automatically issue a, hey, just letting you know that there's a travel advisory, or having that attached to your passport in some way. Another one is really around business processes. So we talked a little bit about birth notifications being sent. And so the benefit of that is all the downstream systems that need to know, rather than you as an individual having to call and inform all these different organizations to, maybe set up a SIN number, right? Or child benefit. Those are the types of things that can automatically happen in the back end. Healthcare, obviously, drug recalls, or, even just linking in with World Health Organization currently through our pandemic, and getting information directly from them that then goes from Health to Health Canada, which is at a federal level, it goes down to the provinces, goes to your GP, and being able to share that information throughout the entire system. And then also looking at it from a business perspective, right? One of the projects we're working on with the Canada Food Inspection Agency is around food export certificates. So when your potatoes as a farmer are piled onto the truck and they're ready to go, you then have to call an inspector who physically has to come in, and they fill out these forms, and then, everything is paper-based and it's sent back in just so that you can export it. So if you could tie that in to automatically, so that the export certificates are sent at the exact same time that you're hauling your potatoes out, then you have the ability to send and ship to market much faster. And of course, internally within the Government of Canada, and I'm sure most organizations are the same, being able to streamline, payroll, human resources. So when we move from one department to another, it's automatically that information is sent from one area to another, and you don't have to wait months and sometimes even years for your information to be transferred. So at the end of the day, who benefits? Obviously, everything we do is for the citizens. They have certain expectations, especially in the past year. We've really upped the ante on what their expectations are from a digital perspective. Same with the Canadian economy, us being able to ship things faster, be more plugged into what's going on within our ecosystem, and really reducing that burden for entrepreneurs, making submissions very quick and seamless, and just a part of their day-to-day workflow. The government definitely benefits. Data quality is one of the things that we're very concerned about. But when you start sharing your data, you start determining which are those authoritative sources of the data, and that really helps clean things up rather than having 20 different sources of data for the one thing. Because I'm sure I can tell you, Teresa D'Andrea in the government of Canada shows up dozens and dozens of times in dozens of different places. So when you start looking at those authoritative sources, it ends up being one person, right? And then that person is linked to the other services. And then on an international perspective, when we start talking about public safety or export and trade, or I don't know, global pandemic, being able to share that information very quickly and seamlessly. And I think one of the key is that real-time data sharing, so that when I'm getting something here in Canada, it's the same time that you're getting it in the UK, it's the same time that Israel is receiving that information. So closing out, how are you going to play, and we talk about having a role to play in writing Canada's digital story, but it's really about, writing our international digital story, I think, at this point from a government perspective. And having those building blocks of various services really is going to help shape how we go about it.